Hello everyone, my name is Amir and today we will be discussing the important topic of glomerular filtration and its regulation. Let us begin this topic by understanding what exactly is glomerular filtration. Glomerular filtration is the first step in the formation of urine. As the blood from the renal artery continues via the afferent arteriole, a portion of this blood is filtered into the Bowman's space, which is the first part of the nephron. The fluid that is filtered is similar to interstitial fluid and is called an ultrafiltrate. The ultrafiltrate contains water and all of the small solutes of blood, but it does not contain proteins and blood cells. The remaining blood leaves the Bowman's capsule via the efferent arteriole, which continues as the renal vein and finally leaves the kidney. To further refine our understanding of the process of glomerular filtration, let us take a look at the structure across which this process actually takes place. As you can see in the diagram, this structure consists of three layers: the endothelium of the capillary, a basement membrane, and a layer of epithelial cells called podocytes surrounding the outer surface of the capillary basement membrane. Together, these layers make up the filtration barrier, which despite the three layers, filters several hundred times as much water and solutes as the usual capillary membrane. The high filtration rate across the glomerular capillary membrane is due partly to its special characteristics. The capillary endothelium is perforated by thousands of small holes called fenestrae, similar to the fenestrated capillaries found in the liver, although smaller than the fenestrae of the liver. Another special characteristic of the glomerular capillary membrane is its specific selectivity for charge and size of the molecule. As you can see in the graph, a molecule that is either neutral or having a positive charge between the size of 4 to 8 nanometer in diameter will be filtered optimally. How does this high charge specificity occur? Because the basement membrane consists of a meshwork of collagen and proteoglycan fibrillae that have large spaces through which the large amounts of water and small solutes can filter. But the basement membrane effectively prevents filtration of the negatively charged proteins because of the strong negative electrical charge associated with the proteoglycans. This negative charge in turn can be attributed to the presence of sialic acid residues in these proteoglycans. The important inference from this is that the plasma proteins, which are normally negatively charged, in spite of meeting the size criteria, will not be filtered across the glomerular capillary membrane under normal physiological conditions. Let us now understand how the exact dynamics of glomerular filtration occur by taking a look at the determinants of GFR. The GFR is determined by the sum of the hydrostatic and colloid osmotic forces across the glomerular membrane, which gives the net filtration pressure. The glomerular capillary filtration coefficient, which is also represented as Kf, and GFR is represented as a multiplication of these two terms. The net filtration pressure represents the sum of the hydrostatic and colloid osmotic forces that either favor or oppose filtration across the glomerular capillary. Like any other capillary in the body, the net result depends on the interplay between the forces that favor filtration and the forces that favor reabsorption. As we can see here in the diagram, the glomerular hydrostatic pressure corresponding to 60 mm mercury is the major force that is favoring filtration. Conversely, the glomerular colloid osmotic pressure, measuring about 32 mm mercury, which is exerted due to the action of the proteins that cannot be filtered across the capillary membrane, but exert their osmotic action and favor reabsorption. Similarly, the Bowman's capsule pressure corresponding to about 18 mm mercury is the one that is also favoring reabsorption. A specific characteristic here is that there is no Bowman colloid osmotic pressure, or rather this pressure is so low that it does not affect the overall process of filtration or reabsorption. Hence, using simple algebra, the net filtration pressure across the glomerular capillary comes out to be about 10 mm mercury. Hence, as we can see in this equation, the glomerular filtration rate is expressed as the product of the filtration coefficient Kf and the net filtration pressure. We have calculated the net filtration pressure as 10 mm mercury and the value of Kf is 12.5 meter square per minute per millimeter mercury under normal physiological conditions. The product of these two values gives the well-known value of 125 ml per minute, which we associate with the glomerular filtration rate. Now let us understand the factors that are affecting GFR under normal conditions. First, let us take a look at the filtration coefficient represented as Kf. Kf is measured by taking into consideration the surface area and the permeability of the capillary. So, an increase or decrease in these will in turn affect the GFR. In certain abnormal conditions like hypoxia, the membrane permeability is increased, which causes the filtration of proteins which increase the colloid oncotic pressure in the Bowman's capsule. Remember that we have previously discussed that the colloid oncotic pressure in the Bowman's capsule is taken to be zero or is very negligible. But in this case, it is a force which is favoring filtration, hence the overall effect will be an increase in GFR. Having understood how permeability influences the filtration coefficient, let us take a look at how area influences it. The filtration coefficient is mainly determined by the area of the mesangial cell. So any factor which causes contraction of the mesangial cell will decrease their surface area, which in turn decreases filtration coefficient. Ultimately, all of this will cause a decrease in the glomerular filtration rate. As we can see in the flowchart, angiotensin II, which is a part of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, endothelin, a powerful endothelial-derived vasoconstrictor, norepinephrine released by the sympathetic nervous system, thromboxane A2, leukotriene C4 and D4 are potent constrictors which cause an overall decrease in GFR. And hence similarly, any factor which will cause relaxation of the mesangial cell will increase their surface area. This increases the filtration coefficient and ultimately increases the glomerular filtration rate. Factors such as dopamine, cyclic AMP, atrial natriuretic peptide, nitric oxide, and prostaglandins, mainly PGE2, are the factors which are causing relaxation of the mesangial cells, which increases the filtration coefficient and increases the GFR. The second factor that we consider is the hydrostatic fluid pressure in the Bowman space. As we discussed previously, it is favoring reabsorption and opposing filtration, so GFR is inversely related to it. Clinically, it may be increased in acute obstruction of the urinary tract, example by a stone. In this case, the filtration will not be efficient and it will be impaired. The third factor that we consider is the glomerular capillary oncotic pressure, which is again favoring reabsorption. Clinically, in hyperproteinemia and in a condition where there is hemoconcentration, it is raised, which is decreasing GFR. And conversely, in hypoproteinemia and hemodilution, it is reduced, leading to an increase in GFR. Now we consider the fourth factor, that is glomerular capillary hydrostatic pressure. This can be studied by first considering the afferent arteriole and then the efferent arteriole. In the case of the afferent arteriole, any condition that causes an increase in the arterial pressure, for example vasodilatation of the afferent arteriole, will cause an increase in the GFR. Conversely, any condition that increases the resistance to the flow, say by causing vasoconstriction, will decrease the GFR. In the case of the efferent arteriole, conversely, a vasoconstriction which increases the resistance will actually increase the GFR rather than hampering it. What we need to understand is that efferent arteriolar constriction is not a phenomenon that is seen in a normal individual under normal physiological condition. But in conditions of hypovolemia or hypoperfusion, due to the action of angiotensin II, which is a part of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, there is powerful constriction of the efferent arteriole, which causes a rise in the glomerular colloid osmotic pressure and hence brings back the GFR to normal. But in conditions where the constriction of the efferent arteriole is very severe, what exactly occurs is that there is an increase in the filtration initially. But as we discussed earlier, the osmotically active proteins that are not filtered across the glomerular capillary membrane remain in the blood and cause reabsorption by their action. Eventually, this reabsorption will exceed filtration and the net effect will be a decrease in GFR rather than the increase which it was eventually aiming for. We can understand what we discussed previously with the help of these two graphs. In the first graph, we can see the effect of efferent arteriolar resistance on glomerular filtration rate and renal blood flow. An increase in the efferent arteriolar resistance to twice, thrice, and then 4 times its value is causing a marked decrease in the renal blood flow, which is expected. But on GFR, the effect is somewhat different. Initially, constriction of the efferent arteriole, which increases its resistance, raises the GFR. But as we discussed previously, Severe constriction of the efferent arteriole will ultimately decrease the GFR rather than raising it. In the second graph, we see the relation of afferent arteriolar resistance with GFR and renal blood flow. Here, in contrast to the efferent arteriole, with an increase in the afferent arteriolar resistance, both GFR and renal blood flow are decreasing markedly. Now we come to the physiological control of GFR. First, we study the action of sympathetic nervous system. Activation of the sympathetic nervous system with the help of its alpha-1 receptors and the release of the two neurotransmitters norepinephrine and epinephrine causes a powerful vasoconstriction of the renal arteriole, which ultimately decreases the GFR. Norepinephrine, epinephrine and another powerful vasoconstrictor, that is endothelin, together are powerful vasoconstrictors, and their ultimate aim is to decrease the GFR. Certain other substances such as endothelial derived nitric oxide, prostaglandins and bradykinin conversely decrease the resistance by causing vasodilatation and ultimately increase the GFR. Now let us see the physiological control of GFR by hormones and autocoids. As we discussed previously, norepinephrine, epinephrine and endothelin decrease the GFR by causing vasoconstriction. Endothelial derived nitric oxide, prostaglandin increase the GFR by causing vasodilatation. Angiotensin II is a tricky customer. In a normal individual, the effect will be somewhat an increase in the GFR. But in a person who is having hypoperfusion or hypovolemia and there is a decrease in GFR due to an underlying pathological condition, angiotensin II is a powerful vasoconstrictor of the efferent arteriole more so than the afferent arteriole, and which will cause an increase in the GFR. Also, it will prevent a further fall or a further deterioration in the case of this patient. Now we come to the autoregulation of GFR. In this, the first process we will see is tubuloglomerular feedback. Before understanding this, let us take a look at the basic anatomy of a nephron. As we can see in the diagram, the Bowman space along with the afferent and the efferent arteriole is seen. The macula densa in concern is a layer of specialized epithelial cells which are formed in the distal convoluted tubule of the nephron. As you can see in the diagram, these are in contact with the afferent arteriole. Now let us understand this actual process. As you can see in the diagram, a decrease in the arterial pressure can cause a decrease in the glomerular hydrostatic pressure, which in turn decreases the GFR. Because of the decrease in GFR, there is a reduction in the delivery of sodium chloride to the macula densa cells. How does this occur? Normally, due to the high GFR, a significant amount of sodium chloride is being filtered and is delivered to the distal convoluted tubule where the macula densa cells are seen. But in this case, because of the decreased GFR, very small amounts of NaCl are filtered, and almost all of this filtered NaCl is being reabsorbed within the proximal convoluted tubule itself. Hence, there is a decreased delivery of sodium chloride to the cells of the macula densa. This causes the macula densa cells to send a signal to the nearby juxtaglomerular cells, which are modified smooth muscle cells in the afferent arteriole, which cause the release of renin. Renin causes the conversion of angiotensinogen to angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 in turn is converted to angiotensin 2 by angiotensin converting enzyme found in the lungs. Angiotensin 2, as discussed earlier, potentially constricts the efferent arteriole a lot more than the afferent arteriole, which causes an increase in the glomerular hydrostatic pressure and brings the GFR back to normal. The second mode of autoregulation that we need to study is the myogenic autoregulation. What is myogenic autoregulation? It is a very simple process where there is an increase in the arterial pressure, which is causing a stretch of the arteriolar wall. This causes the entry of calcium ions from the ECF into the smooth muscle cells of the vessel wall. As we know, calcium will help these cells to contract. So there is a contraction of the vessel which is preventing the over distension and in turn is increasing the vascular resistance. So what this is doing is that it is protecting the GFR from rising to an exceedingly high value when the arterial pressure itself is very high. Now let us come to the applied aspect. Here, let us discuss two common diseases that we tend to confuse often: nephritic syndrome and nephrotic syndrome. Nephritic syndrome or nephritis is any condition associated with the inflammation of the glomeruli. What this does is basically increases the permeability of the glomerular membrane for proteins and red blood cells. The presence of red blood cells in the urine, which is not a normal constituent, gives it a cola color. The most common cause of primary glomerulonephritis is Buerger's disease or IgA-mediated nephropathy. Diabetic nephropathy is another leading cause of glomerulonephritis. Now let us see nephrotic syndrome. Nephrotic syndrome is a condition in which there is a loss of the negatively charged sialic acid residues associated with the proteoglycans of the basement membrane. Consequently, there is a massive leakage of albumin in the urine causing massive proteinuria. We must remember that albumin is not stopped due to its size, which is well within the range that can be filtered. It is stopped because of its negative charge, which is repelled by the negatively charged sialic acid residues within the proteoglycans. Due to the loss of albumin in the urine, there is peripheral edema seen in these patients. Also, there is compensatory increase in the synthesis of lipoproteins by the liver, causing hyperlipidemia. Another disease that we should know about is Goodpasture syndrome, a condition in which antibodies are formed against the type 4 basement membrane collagen, which is also known as Goodpasture's antigen. Because of this antigen, which is present in the basement membrane, antibodies are formed which attack it. They normally tend to attack the basement membrane in the glomeruli and in the lungs, causing hematuria and hemoptosis. Do like and share this video as much as possible. Thank you.